The sound of metal colliding with quartz glass and silicon was not merely the noise of a laboratory being dismantled. It was the sound of a future being murdered by its own creator on a sweltering afternoon in 1939. In Salt Lake City, Thomas Henry Moray raised a heavy hammer and, with a fury fueled by desperation, systematically struck the device the world would later call impossible. Hundreds of ionic discharge valves, the result of 20 years of sleepless nights, isolation and blood, were reduced to useless shards. In that moment, the man who had discovered how to power entire cities without burning a single gram of coal or splitting a single atom, decided that the secret would die with him. But the hammer was not the beginning of the destruction. It was the climax. Weeks earlier, while driving down a deserted road in Utah, the glass of his car shattered under the impact of high-precision projectiles. They were not robbers. They were messengers. The message was clear. The energy Moray was drawing from what he called the sea of energy was too free for a world built on scarcity. The Utah engineer had committed the unforgivable sin of finding a flaw in the global control system. And now the reality he had tried to build was being erased from the footnotes of official science, page by page, demonstration by demonstration, bullet by bullet. What remained was silence, and a question that has echoed for nearly a century. What was really inside that wooden box that could generate 50,000 watts of pure energy from absolute nothing? We are the unseen key, and our mission is to unearth the truths that have been buried beneath layers of convenience and fear. If you believe that history is written by the victors, but that the future belongs to those who seek the truth, your presence here is an act of resistance. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a like. Every interaction is a guarantee that names like Moray's will not be forgotten. The journey begins now. But before we can understand what Moray destroyed in that laboratory, we need to understand what he built and where the spark that ignited it all came from. The answer does not begin in Utah. It begins decades earlier, in the mind of another genius the world also chose to forget. Thomas Henry Moray's obsession was not born in a vacuum. It was the continuation of a revolution and of a tragedy. The revolution began with Nikola Tesla. And when we talk about Tesla here on this channel, we are not talking about an icon on a t-shirt or a name on an electric car. We are talking about the man who had his dreams deliberately destroyed by the very same system that would later pursue Moray and that would later still pursue Stanley Meyer. 3 men, 3 different eras, the same hand on the trigger. If you have not yet watched our video on Tesla, the invitation stands. After this one, it is the next essential stop for anyone who wants to understand the full extent of this war. Tesla, born in 1856, was the architect of transmission. His great dream, materialized in the Wardenclyffe Tower at the start of the 20th century, was to use the Earth itself and the ionosphere as conductors to send wireless energy to any point on the planet. Tesla saw the world as a distribution system, vast, generous, universal. Moray, born in 1892, represented the evolution of that thinking. He did not want to transmit energy. He wanted to harvest it wherever it existed. While Tesla was the master of high voltages and macrophysics, Moray became the master of semiconductors and microphysics. 2 men gazing at the same ocean. One wanted to build canals, the other wanted to learn how to float. He perceived something that Tesla had only scratched the surface of. Space is not a void. It is a vibrant ocean of ultra-high-frequency energy, silent and inexhaustible. Between 1910 and 1920, Moray traveled to Sweden, where he discovered a material he would call the Swedish stone, a semiconducting crystal he believed was capable of acting as a one-way valve for the fluctuations of the vacuum. The ultimate antenna, the universe's receiver. In 1925, he achieved what Tesla could not, a small, portable device capable of generating electricity at an industrial scale with no external connection. But to understand how he got there, we need to go back even further. To the boy, to the 9-year-old in Salt Lake City who dismantled electric motors because he needed to know what was inside. Thomas Henry Moray was born on August 28, 1892, in Salt Lake City, Utah, the son of Henry Noah Moray, a European immigrant of humble origins. He grew up in a city that still smelled of mining dust and the promises of the American West. There was nothing in his background that suggested what he would become, except everything. From childhood, he showed an insatiable curiosity about the invisible, about what moved thunder, about what made compass needles oscillate, about what Marconi had captured from the air with his radio experiments. At just 9 years old, he dismantled an electric motor and rebuilt it with his own modifications. By 12, he had built a rudimentary radio receiver without any formal instruction whatsoever, the academic world of turn of the century. Salt Lake City had no room for this. Boy, he would ask out loud why energy necessarily had to come from burning something. Teachers changed the subject. Classmates laughed. Moray learned very early on that the most important questions are the ones the system would rather you not ask. His education was deeply self-taught. He devoured the writings of Tesla, Oliver Lodge, and Hertz. As an adult, he obtained technical training abroad, honing his skills in Sweden, where he briefly worked for an electrical engineering firm and had his first contact with the semiconducting crystals that would later form the heart of everything. Upon returning to Utah, he was a different man. In his bags, he carried not only tools and mineral samples, but a theory that trespassed into the most dangerous territories of physics. The idea that the quantum vacuum was not empty, but the universe's greatest energy reservoir. That all it took was building the right antenna to listen to it. It was not naivety. It was conviction born of years of observation, and it would be exactly that conviction that would turn the rest of his life into a battlefield, beginning with the demonstrations that would leave Salt Lake City breathless. The setting was always the same, a clean room, a simple antenna stretched out through a window, a wooden box, no batteries, no hidden connections, no visible fuel source. Moray would connect a bank of incandescent bulbs to his device, turn a selector, and after a brief warm-up period, the bulbs blazed with a blinding intensity. A cold white light that seemed different from ordinary electricity, cleaner, quieter, as if it came from somewhere else. Credible witnesses, professors from the University of Utah, electrical engineers from the United States Navy, searched the house, the laboratory, and the inventor himself for hidden wires or magic tricks. Nothing was found. The device did not merely generate light. It generated heat and powered heavy electric motors for hours on end. In a famous 1928 demonstration, he kept the device running for days straight, drawing the equivalent of 50 kilowatts of constant power from the surrounding environment. Unlike Tesla's coils, which created spectacular displays of lightning and static, Moray's device was silent, cool, and stable. Disturbingly stable, and it was exactly that stability that terrified the status quo. If energy was free and could be collected anywhere with a device the size of a suitcase, what would happen to the billions invested in copper infrastructure, hydroelectric dams, and coal plants? The answer came fast. The United States Patent Office systematically rejected Moray's applications, claiming that a self-sustaining device was, by definition, a perpetual motion machine, forbidden by the laws of official physics. Moray knew they were not debating physics. They were buying time. And while the bureaucracy tried to suffocate him through paperwork, he began doing something his adversaries feared even more than the demonstrations. He began to write. In 1931, Moray formalized his ideas for the first time in a technical document that circulated in a restricted manner among engineers and physicists. That document would become the foundation of what would later become his most famous book, published in 1956 under the title The Sea of Energy in Which the Earth Floats. The title was not metaphorical, it was literal. To Moray, the universe was permeated by an energy of extremely high frequency and inconceivable density, on the order of 10 to the power of 44 ergs per cubic centimeter, a number so absurdly large that the physicists of the time dismissed it as mathematical delirium. Decades later, when quantum field physics began developing the concept of zero-point energy, the theoretical estimates for vacuum energy density began, strangely, to converge on exactly the orders of magnitude Moray had proposed. He was not delirious, he was ahead of his time. The book was suppressed. Technical publishers that had initially expressed interest suddenly withdrew after conversations with representatives of major corporations. Moray was forced to self-publish in limited print runs, which were bought up in bulk and disappeared from the market before reaching the general public. Some independent researchers claim to have found records of bulk purchases by corporate entities whose names were never disclosed. What made the book even more dangerous than the device itself was its accessible language. Moray was not writing only for engineers. He was writing for anyone who could read. He explained that the energy powering the sun, the stars, and cosmic rays was the same energy he had learned to collect. If anyone with the right materials could replicate the device, the energy monopoly was not merely threatened, it was doomed. And it was exactly at that moment that forces far greater than publishers and patent offices began to move. The Great Depression turned the world into a place of desperation, and desperation for the powerful is always an opportunity. While millions starved, the Utah inventor became a target of international interest. Soviet agents, disguised as business partners, began circling his laboratory, offering fortunes and unlimited resources for him to move his research to Russia. Moray refused. He was a committed patriot. He believed his technology should belong to the American people and the free world. But the American government itself seemed more interested in suppressing his invention than in adopting it. The Rural Electrification Administration, the REA, launched investigations that looked more like interrogations than technical assessments. Moray became a watched man. Black cars parked outside at irregular hours. Correspondence that arrived opened and resealed. His wife and children living under anonymous threats. The weight of being publicly labeled a charlatan by media funded by electric corporations. But he persisted. He refined his Moray valve. He eliminated the need for an external antenna. He proved that the energy could be captured even at the bottom of mines or beneath the ocean, definitively invalidating the theory that he was merely picking up conventional radio waves. And then, one night while working in his laboratory, a gunman opened fire through the windows. The bullet passed within inches of his head. The local police never investigated the incident seriously. The message was clear. The legal system would not protect him. What his assailants did not know was that the secret of the Moray valve lay not only in its design, it lay in a material so singular, so difficult to reproduce, that mass production was nearly impossible without the state support that was systematically denied to him. To understand that material, that central piece of the puzzle Moray called the Swedish stone, we must dive into the place where chemistry meets the impossible. The heart of the Moray valve was not a circuit, it was a crystal. Unlike the common vacuum tubes of the era, Moray's valves used a combination of doped elements, high-purity germanium, silicon, and other minerals he processed personally in high-temperature furnaces, using a method he never fully documented, carrying the technique only in memory and in his hands. He was, in practice, the silent pioneer of solid-state physics, anticipating by decades the discoveries that would lead to the transistor. The Swedish stone, the crystal discovered during his time in Sweden, possessed unique semiconducting properties. Moray believed it acted as a natural rectifier, capable of converting the ultra-high frequency oscillations of the vacuum energy field into usable electric current. For decades, he tried to obtain independent analyses of the material. Laboratories that accepted the samples mysteriously delayed or cancelled the analyses. Never a definitive answer, never a complete report. And then came 1947. Bell Labs announced the invention of the transistor based on research into doped germanium and silicon that bears a deeply unsettling resemblance to Moray's work. No credit was given to the Utah inventor. Some researchers believe that documents obtained during years of FBI surveillance reached the hands of physicists who would later win the Nobel Prize. There is no way to prove it, but there is a way to ask, how is it possible that a man so advanced in semiconductors was completely erased from the timeline of solid-state physics? While those physicists received honors in Stockholm, Moray was preparing what he believed would be his last chance to prove to the world that he was right. A definitive demonstration, an undeniable public victory. He did not know the trap had already been set. Before the demonstration came, the psychological siege, Moray began seeing familiar faces in places where they should not have been. A Salt Lake City neighbor appeared as a clerk in a government office in Washington. The man who had fixed a utility pole near his house turned up as a cab driver in Chicago. These were not hallucinations. It was a tactic known today as overt surveillance, constant presence, calculated to destroy the target's sanity by making him feel there. There is no safe space anywhere in the entire world. The official demonstration took place in 1939. Government officials arrived with a hostility they barely concealed. When Moray opened the device for inspection, one of the technicians, supposedly by accident, dropped a heavy tool onto the central component. The delicate Moray valve, which had taken months to calibrate, was destroyed in a single second. Instead of apologizing, the officials declared the test a failure due to technical fragility and left. Moray stood motionless before the wreckage. In that silence, he understood that he was not fighting against ignorance. He was fighting against intent, deliberate, organized, and larger than him. Weeks later came the shots at the car. Then the laboratory had to be moved to a secret location. Then the pistol by the bed every night. And then, in a surge of desperate self-preservation, he picked up the hammer. He destroyed the 50-kilowatt prototype, the only one that worked with absolute perfection. And he swore that the secret would never fall into the hands of those who only wanted to control it. But destroying the device was not surrendering to defeat. Moray had a plan, one last move, made not of metal and crystal but of paper, ink, and the hope that future generations would be braver than his own. The silence that followed the destruction of the prototype was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a man recalibrating. In the years that followed, Moray took deliberate steps to ensure that even if his device could not be replicated, his story could not be entirely erased. He hid fragments of his notes in different locations. He entrusted parts of the technical secret to his son John, others to a small circle of trusted researchers. Still others remained only in his mind, intentionally. It was a compartmentalization strategy that went far beyond engineering. Thomas Henry Moray had become involuntarily a counterintelligence operative in a war he never chose to fight. During the 1940s, as the world burned in World War II, military officials came looking for him. The Manhattan Project needed minds that understood semiconductors and high-frequency radiation. Moray refused, flatly. He had seen what power did with technologies that threatened the status quo. He was not willing to watch free energy be converted into a weapon. That refusal was what definitively condemned him. From the perspective of the military-industrial complex, Moray moved from a problem to be managed to a threat to be neutralized. His last allies at universities were pressured to distance themselves. Suppliers disappeared. The man who had demonstrated an inexhaustible energy source to the world could now barely pay his own household electricity bills. The irony was deliberate. And what made it even more disturbing was the growing awareness that this was not an accident of history. It was a protocol, a tested and proven playbook. And Moray was not the first test subject. There is a specific kind of pain in realizing that you are not the first. That before you, another man had the same dream, fought the same fight, and lost in the same way. And that after you, a third would repeat the cycle without knowing he was repeating it. Tesla dreamed of free energy for all of humanity. He built the Wardenclyffe Tower, and when J.P. Morgan asked where the meters would be installed in a wireless transmission system, how free energy would be charged, the funding was cut. The tower was demolished. The dream buried. Tesla's full story is here on the channel, and it is the opening scene of a script the world prefers not to recognize as a script. Moray came after. You already know what happened to Moray, and after Moray came Stanley Meyer. In the 1980s, Meyer repeatedly demonstrated a system capable of using water electrolysis with an efficiency radically superior to what conventional physics considered possible, powering an automobile engine using water as its primary fuel. Public demonstrations, witnesses registered patents, and then, in March 1998, Meyer died suddenly during a dinner with supposed investors. Before dying, he reportedly ran out of the restaurant saying he had been poisoned. The official cause, cerebral aneurysm. Meyer's story is also here on the channel, and it is disturbing in a different way from Moray's. Faster, more brutal, more recent than we would like to admit. Tesla, Moray, Meyer, three men who never met. Three eras separated by decades. Three different technologies. And the same sequence, promising discovery, verifiable demonstrations, interest from hidden forces, isolation, destruction, of the technology first, of the inventor after. This is not coincidence. It is method. And while that method operated externally against Moray, another kind of destruction was happening inside his own home, quieter, more intimate, and in many ways more devastating than any bullet. After the prototype was destroyed, Moray tried to rebuild it. The necessary materials became inexplicably difficult to obtain. Long-standing suppliers stopped filling his orders on orders of national defense priority, they said. The onset of World War II gave the government the perfect pretext to monitor independent scientists without needing justification. The historical silencing happened in parallel. Encyclopedias omitted his name. Similar experiments at universities were discontinued without explanation. The term radiant energy was ridiculed as pseudoscience, despite the hundreds of experts who had witnessed the device in operation. Moray spent the 1940s and 50s in relative obscurity, working as a technical consultant for small companies, always under the watchful eye of the FBI. Declassified documents would later reveal that the government monitored even his trips to the grocery store. The engineer who had dreamed of lighting the world for free now struggled to keep the lights on in his own house. The human cost was devastating. Heart problems, a chronic distrust that distanced him even from those closest to him. But Moray still held one last card up his sleeve, his son John, to whom he had entrusted fragments of the technical secret, the hope that a less corrupted generation might finish what he had started. That inheritance, however, would prove to be as heavy as it was incomplete. John Moray inherited not only notes, he inherited an impossible mission and the curse that came with it. During the 1960s and 70s, John dedicated a considerable portion of his life to attempting to rebuild his father's device. He had access to what no other researcher possessed: handwritten notebooks in personal notations that Thomas had developed as a form of private cryptography, partially preserved samples of the catalytic compound, and electrical schematics describing valve configurations, with no equivalent in any commercially available technology of the era. But the Swedish stone was irreproducible. The germanium purification process that Thomas had developed empirically, in memory in his hands, without systematic documentation, had not been transmitted in complete form. It was like trying to reproduce the Mona Lisa, having only the list of pigments Da Vinci used, without access to the layering technique, the brushwork, the patience of decades. The most important knowledge was in the gesture, not in the words. Even so, John pressed on. He published technical supplements to his father's book. He maintained correspondence with researchers around the world. In 1978, he declared in an interview that he had built a functional device on a reduced scale, capable of lighting a series of low-power bulbs. And immediately, as had happened with his father, the interest of government agents and corporations appeared at the door. John retreated into silence. John Moray's story confirmed something terrible. Thomas's problem was not personal, it was systemic. The system did not only attack inventors, it attacked their children, the researchers, anyone who tried to keep the flame alive. And if that system was effective at silencing people, it was less effective at silencing the laws of physics, which were slowly finding their own way back to the surface. Physics does not forgive time. Sooner or later, what is true reappears, under another name, in another laboratory, with no memory of where it came from. Thomas had discovered a method of germanium purification so advanced that it was only matched by mainstream industry in the 1970s. He used microscopic layers of doping that created a tunneling effect for electrons, allowing the vacuum fluctuations to be converted into usable electric current. The Utah engineer was not merely an inventor, he was an alchemist of the electronic age. Working with instruments the world still had no vocabulary to describe. In 1997, the Casimir effect was experimentally demonstrated for the first time. It proved that the quantum vacuum exerts a measurable force between extremely close conducting surfaces, confirming, decades later, that it is not truly empty. Research into quantum tunneling diodes at NASA and MIT laboratories explores exactly the kind of energy extraction from vacuum fluctuations that Moray described with his solid-state valves. In 2012, researchers at the University of Arizona published a paper on the possibility of developing quantum tunneling rectifiers capable of converting vacuum fluctuations into usable current. They cited the Casimir effect as the theoretical basis. They did not mention Moray. They had likely never heard of him, and that is exactly the goal of effective silencing. Not to create martyrs, to create amnesia. Science is advancing in the direction Moray described, but advancing as if arriving at virgin territory. It is not. That territory has been walked, and the footprints were carefully erased. What no laboratory in the world can reproduce, however, is the weight of an entire family carrying this secret across decades. That part of the story appears in no scientific paper. Behind all the technical and political narrative, there is a human story that is rarely told. A woman, children, a watched house, and a man who knew exactly what he had lost and had chosen to lose it. Nevada Grundy Moray stood by her husband throughout decades of pressure, public humiliation, and physical threats. She never gave detailed interviews. The fragments that survive in personal letters reveal a woman who understood the importance of her husband's work and consciously chose to share the burden. Knowing the price, the Moray children grew up in an atmosphere of justified paranoia. They learned from an early age that they could not talk about their father's work with friends or teachers, that strangers could be anywhere. That trust was a luxury that family could not afford. That environment left marks that followed them into adulthood, invisible scars from a war that was never declared. Thomas himself, in the few interviews he granted in his final years, displayed a disturbing combination: absolute lucidity about the reality surrounding him and deep melancholy about what could have been. He did not grieve for himself. He grieved for humanity. In one of his last recorded statements, he said something that remained engraved in the memory of those who were present. "It was not I who lost. It was humanity that lost. I was merely the messenger who carried the message too far from the sender, and too close to those who had an interest in intercepting it. A man who spent his life lighting rooms to prove that humanity could live in the light. and who died knowing he had consciously chosen to extinguish the only light that truly mattered, so that it would not be used as a torch by those who prefer the darkness of control. It was with that weight on his shoulders that he walked toward the end. The climax of Thomas Henry Moray's trajectory was not an explosion. It was a long exhale. He died in May 1974 in Salt Lake City, the same city that had witnessed his triumphs and his greatest humiliations. In his final days, he remained lucid, surrounded by thousands of pages of handwritten notes that no one else could fully decipher. The knowledge was there, alive, inaccessible. After his death, there was a swift and silent attempt to clear out what remained of his laboratory. Agencies that never identified themselves, materials that disappeared. But his son managed to preserve part of the archive, keeping the flame alive. However faintly, the ultimate destruction of Moray was not physical, it was historiographical. If you open a textbook today, the Moray effect does not exist. The Moray valve is treated as a footnote about electrical fraud, if it is mentioned at all. Yet modern science is rediscovering, under names like zero-point energy and quantum vacuum fluctuations, exactly what the Utah engineer described in 1920. He was right. He was just too far ahead of his time. And in a world that prefers profit to freedom, being right too soon is a death sentence. Moray's story teaches us that human progress is not a straight line. It is a battlefield, where the best ideas often lose to the best armies. But ideas do not die the way men do. They wait. And what remains for us is not to mourn the defeat. It is to decide what to do with it. When we look at the life of Thomas Henry Moray, we see more than the story of a wronged inventor. We see the reflection of our own condition. We live in a world starved for energy, torn apart by wars over fossil resources, haunted by climate crises that could have been avoided if, in 1939, that hammer had not been necessary. Moray's sea of energy still surrounds us, invisible, inexhaustible, indifferent to our conflicts, a silent reminder that the solution to our greatest problems may be in the air we breathe. If only we were permitted to see it. Tesla dreamed of it. Moray held it in his hands. Meyer paid with his life trying to resurrect it. 3 men, 3 generations. A wound that does not close. These 3 names, Tesla, Moray, Meyer, do not form a list of victims. They form a map of where humanity could have gone and was prevented from going. Each chapter of that map is here on the channel, waiting for those who wish to read it. The unseen key exists so that silence does not win. So that names like Thomas Henry Moray's are not merely echoes in obscure forums, but pillars of a new awareness of what is possible and of who decided it would not be. If this investigation has awakened in you the righteous indignation needed to question the truths being sold to you, then we have done what we came to do, become a guardian of this memory. Share this video. Comment what you felt while watching. If you have not yet subscribed, do it now. Every new subscriber is a voice the system cannot silence. Your presence here is what prevents the hammer of history from falling again on the truth. Thomas Henry Moray died believing his secret was safe in the grave. But he forgot that truth has its own frequency, and that frequency never stops oscillating. The question now is not whether free energy exists. The question is, do we have the courage to be free enough to use it? The future is waiting. The key has always been there, invisible only to the eyes of those who refuse to see.